Hi, welcome everybody. Here I have my next guest, which is Tessa Thompson. Just kidding. Meghan Markle. Just kidding. Tessa Markle, the
It's
coolest
me.
name ever. The combination of all these badass women, actresses, princesses. You have the best name ever.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for having me on, Jamie. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Thank you. I'm so excited too. So, for those who don't know Tessa, soon you will. So we met probably like 8 years ago or something doing catering, which I was just reflecting on this morning. Look how far we've come.
Yeah.
Like we're making movies, we're living the dream. I mean, it always gets better, of course, but as far as like where we came from when we first met, it's just really amazing to realize all that we've gone through and then all the gifts that we've received, all the blessings.
Absolutely. It's funny too, because I mean, I'm still doing catering as my day job, but like everything I've
Right.
accomplished along the way, like I couldn't be more happy. So
Yeah, I was thinking of that as well. Like I'm also doing I'm doing virtual assistant work, so it's like a little bit different, but I did just do a brand ambassador gig a few weeks ago, which is pretty much what I was doing 8 years ago also. So it's kind of funny, but then also it's like I'm meeting people that I've been a fan of for a while and um making movies and networking like crazy, and it's interesting how it's integrated. And I think that when we think of our dreams, we don't see it as integrated, so we think it's one or the other, either we've made it or we haven't, but most of the journey I think is the in between.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to love the process, especially like with a creative career. Like that's the journey is half of it. You may never even get to the end destination. So you really have to love what you're doing along the way.
That is a good point. So let me go ahead and introduce you. So this is Tessa Markle, everybody. And Tessa, can you introduce yourself and tell people your passions and what you're all about and anything that you want them to know about you as a first impression?
Sure. So my name is Tessa Markle. I'm an actress, filmmaker, and podcaster. I grew up about an hour outside of the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I've been in LA now for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years next summer. Came out here to do acting and realized I needed to create my own content to really get anywhere in the way that Hollywood is nowadays. So became a filmmaker out of that. I co-run my own production company, Femme Productions, and we also co-host a podcast all about indie filmmaking called Femme Podcast. And it's been a really cool journey. Like we were saying, like getting to where I am today. I've learned so much. I've had so many experiences. I've met so many people. And I think it's all really helped shape me into the person that I am today.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love everything that you're all about. So I feel like I'll ask some questions, but also I would love for you just to share about what this has been like for you, because it really is such a common, I guess, journey. I feel like that's so cliche to say, but it's a common journey that somebody moves to LA and chooses acting and then realizes that they have to also do other things. And so, what's awesome about you is you're actually doing it and it's working. And I imagine that feels empowering.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I came out here specifically wanting to act, and that's still number one on my list. I mean, I'm a filmmaker because I need to create my own content more than I really feel like I specifically want to be a filmmaker. But, it all works together, and it's really taught me too to accept that your priorities and your goals and everything are going to change along the way. I was literally just thinking about this morning, actually, when you sent me some topics to talk about. And, I've realized now that everything is so remote, I've been talking a lot about moving out of LA. And, when I first had that thought, it was like, oh man, am I giving up on my dreams? And it's not giving up because I'm still going to pursue acting. It's just, shifting priorities and goals. When I came out here, I thought, well, I want to be a working actor. I want that to be my day job and the only thing that I'm doing. And now I'm realizing, okay, it's really just more important for me to get to act, even if that means I'm not making a living from doing it. And I don't mind having that, survival job or whatever on the side too. I like having or getting to have, these multiple passions. And so I think that's a really important thing that comes with growth in his career, is really learning to like shift your perspective and your priorities and your goals, and to accept that along the way too, because that's hard. Sometimes you feel like you're giving up, or you feel like you have imposter syndrome, and it's like you just need to sit down and accept it.
Yeah, it's also funny how things happen in a way that we don't necessarily have control over, but also that we can't necessarily foresee. So for instance, sometimes letting go is what it takes in order to make it. So I
Mhm.
wasn't even planning on mentioning this, but I figured at some point I'll mention this on the podcast. But okay, so I had lived in LA multiple times. I just moved out here for the third time. When I left the second time, I didn't know if or when I'd be coming back. I knew that I still wanted to act, but kind of similar to what you're saying, that my priorities were shifting. And I don't want to say the reality was setting in, because it's not like there was any definitive thing of like, this isn't working. It wasn't like that. But once I moved away and let go of that control, that's when everything started happening. I've been in the industry for 11 years. And all of a sudden this year, I mean, I know I just moved back, but I'm saying before I moved back, while I was away, things started happening. I got my first lead role in a feature film, and I got into casting, and I got an opportunity to move back to LA, which for me is a win because I wanted to be here. And there's probably more things I can't think of, but it was very exciting. And I couldn't believe that all of these opportunities were happening once I left. And I think it's because I wasn't putting so much pressure.
Mhm.
And also, I was living home rent free, which helps. So I wasn't focusing on a survival job and spending all of my time and energy just on how am I going to afford rent. So it gave me room to breathe. And I'm not saying that that way was right versus a different way. What I'm saying is that life has these different phases and eras. And as long as we can release control, they can they can kind of come together when they're meant to and how they're meant to. And I think that's when real blessings really happen, because we're letting go and surrendering and trusting. So, not promising that as soon as you move away, everything's going to everything's going to happen exactly the way that you dreamed. But what I'm saying is kudos to you for trying different things and not being stubborn and feeling like this is the only way.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I see that manifest even in auditions. Like once I kind of learned like, hey, you're gonna audition a lot. Like everyone cannot be the make it or break it. You can't tie that much, weight to every audition. So I started getting way less nervous going into the audition rooms. I started really realizing like, don't plan for this, like actually plan for you not to get it. And then if you do, like that's a win and that's amazing. And it just like it made me audition better because it didn't matter. I could just have fun with it. And that's just a small specific thing, but like applying that to an entire career, I think it all holds true.
The first thing is I want to make sure that you mention your movie that you've been working on and that's coming out. So I'm actually just going to start with that. So please talk about Sync.
Sure. So me and my production partner, Carolina, we formed our production company, Femme Productions, in 2018. And then we filmed our first feature film this summer. It's called Sync, SYNC. And it is a psychological thriller set in a sci-fi world in the near future, where we examine toxic female friendships through the lens of unhinged tech advancement. So it was a huge undertaking for us, but it was also very fun. And we are in post production for it now. We are actually raising money right now through an Indiegogo campaign, which you can just literally find us if you Google or if you search Sync on the Indiegogo page. And we are hoping to have the movie out somewhere to watch in the early spring. We're not sure if we'll be doing festivals first or if it'll be out for distribution, But you guys can follow along on the journey. So get your updates by following us on social media at Femme Regard and at Sync the Movie. We also have a monthly newsletter. If you go to our website, femregard.com, and a little pop-up will come up. You just enter your email address. And the newsletter also has like lots of discounts and like cool classes and events going on in LA and stuff. So we really feel like, you know, our subscribers get something more than just our updates from that newsletter. And we also have a podcast, like I mentioned, called Femme Regard Podcast on all the major platforms, where we bring on industry professional guests, and it really allows the listener insight into the industry of indie filmmaking, and lots of updates on the movie there too.
Sounds awesome. And I'll definitely put a lot of those details in the show notes so that people can take action and help, because you guys, you want to get this movie finished. I have this bag. I was one of the donors. And I take this bag with me everywhere. I love it so much. So what I like to ask my guests, it might seem kind of random, but I want to know if you have a go-to morning routine. And the reason I ask is because I think that everything is connected. And so how we spend our time and energy and our sleep patterns and our schedule, things like that, I think that that really bleeds into the rest of our, not only our day, but how, I guess, like the quality of our life. And so
Mhm.
if we have this goal in entertainment, and we're spending all of our time at our day job, and then we're too tired to work on our craft at the end of the day or something, then one thing to look at is our routine and how we can shift. So as I'm interviewing people where their life is working, then maybe some people can get some tips on, like, oh, okay, this is what they're doing and this is what's working. And the result is, oh my goodness, they have this movie that they've made where maybe I'm having trouble even, like, writing my script or something like that. So that's why I ask about the morning routine. So do you have one? Sometimes we don't.
I I have a routine that I do pretty much every morning, and then I have like my ideal morning routine,
Yeah.
because I like, my schedule is completely random. Like, you know, of course, having a career in the arts, like you never really know when you're gonna, you know, have an audition, be booked, whatever. But then my day job even is, it's not a 9 to 5 in the least. Like my hours are totally different every single week. So my mornings look totally different every single day. But I definitely am a coffee person. That's like the first thing I do when I get up. I feed my cat, I take my vitamins, I make my coffee. Those are definite things that happen every single morning. I like to listen to NPR in the morning, just get kind of the morning updates of what's going on in the world. I am not a huge news person, but I also don't like to rely solely on social media. So that's kind of a happy little medium. And I mean, I'm totally honest, I will scroll on social media for the first like half hour of my day, you know, catch up on messages, email, social media, all of that stuff. So those are kind of things that happen pretty much every single morning for me. If I have extra time, I do really like to take the time to, I say meditate, but it's less of a traditional meditation and more just a culmination of things. I love to do yoga, even if it's just like simple stress stretching and not like a full, you know, yoga practice, just something to kind of get my body moving a little bit in the morning. And I really love breath work. I'm a big fan of Wim Hof breathing. I like, the more when I find when I do that more regularly, I genuinely feel the good effects from it.
Can you explain
Um,
about Wim Hof? I've heard of it, but for
yeah.
people who haven't heard of it, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Wim Hof, he's, you know, he's one of those holistic people that has really, he's become famous because the things that he practices and has shared with the world, he's found and been able to prove that they work. One thing he's a big proponent of is cold plunges, ice baths. I can't handle that. I'm not like a cold shower person or anything. But his breathing method I found is really helpful. And it just has to do with, you take a lot, like a rapid succession of breaths in and out, more in than out. Then you kind of hold the breath, compress, let it all out, hold it out. take a deep breath in, like as deep as you can, hold that in. So it has to do with the oxygen retention, and it oxygenates your blood, which is a great way to help keep your immune system up. It's a great way to kind of regulate that like mind body connection. And it kind of gives you like a natural high for a few seconds too, because, you know, you're almost kind of hyperventilating, but like, it's not like in a painful way or anything, I promise. It's really easy to do. But it just, yeah, it kind of clears my mind. So I find when I am able to do that in the morning and have time or think to do it in the morning, it does really get me on like a better, more kind of Zen attitude for the day.
Awesome. Was there anything else for the morning routine? I interrupted you a little bit about the Wim Hof.
Uh, I think really those are the main things. If I do have extra time, I mean, I love to fit a workout in the morning, like after I've kind of woken up. I'm not the person that can do it at like 5 a.m., but you know, if I've had my coffee, I've got to do my breathing and whatever, like that's a great time for me to fit a workout in. Or I like to pull tarot cards a lot of times. I'll just pull like one card for the day, especially if there's something specific I'm struggling with. I think that's kind of a good way to like start the day off.
Awesome. So the next question is about synchronicity. And I do want to ask if you've had any how do you say that word? Synchronously,
Synchronotic? I have no idea.
have you had any synchronotic moments? Synchronomously? I don't know. Let's go synchronotic. Have you had any synchronotic moments in your life that have kind of like changed your life? And of course, I want to mention what happened to us the other day, but I'll let you go first and then I'll share, unless that's the only thing you could think of.
I mean, it's tough for me to think of really specific, like life-changing moments like that, but I have them all the time. And, you know, I've always been like a little into like, you know, the woo-woo of things, but I got really in tune with my spirituality like during the pandemic. And that's when I really developed a more regular yoga practice and learned how to meditate better and got into breath work and just like really started to dive into learning more about spirituality. And I've been learning a lot about the occult. Like that's been a branch off that's really been interesting me lately. And it, you know, since tuning into all of that, I think I put a lot more stock into synchronicities and I really
Yeah.
noticed them more. And
Yeah.
it's been happening so much since then. And it really is a great, like, people that just say, oh, well, that's a coincidence. Like, sure, any of them could be. But you also have how many people are like, give me a sign, give me a sign. Well, that's the sign. You know, if you are on a path to something and you're questioning whether or not you're making the right decisions and you get a nice little synchronicity like that, like, take it as a sign. And I do really feel like it's been showing me that I am on the right path for a lot of things, whether that is like really diving deep into my spirituality, whether that is considering this move out of LA, whether that was even, you know, before we started filming Sync, like, is this worth doing? And just, there's been so many little things that completely like just remind me all the time that I'm on the right path.
Yeah. Speaking of being on the right path, so Deepak Chopra has a book called Synchro Destiny. Have you heard of it?
No.
So it's combining synchronicity and destiny. So his theory is that when we see all these synchronicities, that they're actually leading us on our particular path. So it's like talking about the signs, like follow the synchronicity, follow the synchronotic moments.
I don't know if that's a word, but like I'm gonna use it from now on.
Yeah,
I
I
like
kind of
it.
like it. Everyone heard it here first. We just invented it. So it kind of just goes along with what you were saying, that it's like they're lined up for you. And so what I'm saying is this is backed up by somebody who's very in tune with this stuff, who's like a master of this stuff. And his theory is that it's like absolutely connected and that it's leading you to your destiny. So I find that really exciting. And so I have to share what happened to us the other day. I don't
Yeah.
even know how much of this I'm allowed to share, so I'll do my best to show how exciting it is with still being discreet. So I was an extra on a film the other day, and because I was an extra, I didn't receive a call sheet, so I didn't know who the actors would be or anything like that. So I show up on set, and then a very famous person, will not name this person, but this very famous person shows up, and that was exciting for me. And talk about synchronicity. I happen to be watching a show currently that he's on. So that was really interesting to me. And then a few minutes later, Tessa shows up as another person in the cast. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, it was so cool to like just see. It's like being surrounded by people that make me happy.
Yeah.
And it was all a surprise. And then to find out that you had synchronicity because somebody who worked on your film was working on this film in a pretty high up position.
Yeah, it was, the person that had brought me onto that film was crew on my film. And once I got there, two other crew members were crew on my film as well that I like had no idea beforehand. So yeah.
It's just really cool, really exciting. Trying to think what else I can share. Really not much, except this is just a personal thing for me that I'm really proud of, that I didn't have any lines because I was an extra, but they featured me. They gave my character a name. One of the leads referenced to my character by name, and I got compliments from the cast and crew that I was very funny. And so essentially, this person who I look up to that I cannot name complimented my acting.
Yes. And you were hilarious. Because I know I just had like the walkthrough first, but then, once I got off the screen, I turned around and I watched you, and it was so good. So cute.
Thank you. So that's another thing that's kind of interesting that I want to share with people that are just getting started. Like, okay, this was unpaid and I was an extra. Most people would turn that down. That's it. Like, they would turn it down. Not only did I go, but I had one of the most magical days of my entire life. And I'm being recognized by people, not by face yet, but I'm being recognized for my talent and, for just who I am. So I want people to hear this and go with your instinct, because my gut told me to work on this project, and I'm just so happy that I did. And then to run into Tessa it's just like, to me, that's a gift. Like, I'm so grateful. And then it also got me reminiscing about how we first met. And then here, after 8 years or so, this was our first time on set together.
Yeah.
We got to act together. We were in a scene.
Finally.
We were in a scene together. It was so cool. It was
Yeah.
really, really fun. And yeah, so magical moments.
I agree with that too, of like, personally, I'm at a place where I don't audition for things that are unpaid anymore, but I will work for my friends for free.
Mm,
Even if it is just, background, like something, no lines, whatever. Like I want to work with my friends,
yeah.
And like in this past month, I've been on set several times for things that people have brought me on for, and they've all been small roles like that, like background or maybe one line or whatever. But, one, for instance, was for a pitch video for a pilot that they already told me, hey, if we get this pilot, like if somebody takes it on, like we really want you to be a part of it. So that's great news already.
Yeah.
Another one was a music video where I ended up getting to help with set deck. So I got to learn about that and made some really great relationship connections there. And, this project, I'm going to be background in another one coming up. Like, it's just, say yes when your friends ask you to do stuff for free. Like, if you're able to, say yes, because you're going to get something good out of it, I promise.
Totally, totally. And even if it doesn't happen now,
Mhm.
it could happen in the future. Like when I
Yeah.
was talking about this year being a lot of momentum for me, a lot of these things, most of the things came from people that I had met years ago. And it's all coming together when it's supposed to. It's very, very interesting. So don't go into something thinking, okay, well, what am I going to get out of it? Or, I mean,
Mhm.
it's one thing if you're really not sure if it's worth your time, but if it's something that you want to do and the only issue is that it's unpaid, just know that there's a lot of other benefits that you could get from it. What chakras are balanced or unbalanced for you, and what practices do you have for when your energy is off?
So I feel like in general, the chakra that is kind of my problem chakra, like usually if I'm feeling unbalanced, it's almost always the same one. And that's my solar plexus. And I can feel it like physically.
Before we go
And
any further, can we just tell
yes.
people what the solar plexus is? So do you want to
Yes.
say it in your own words?
If you want to go ahead and explain it, that's fine.
The way that I talk about it is personal power and identity.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
about you?
And I agree with that. I agree with that a lot. And like physically it's located kind of, I guess it would be like, well, it's between your heart and stomach areas. That's probably just the easiest general way to put it. Um, and I knew a little bit about the chakras, but not totally like what each one really represented necessarily, more just kind of like where they were physically.
Oh, I wrote down
Um,
for you. I wrote down the little
right. No,
clues.
I mean, I know now
Oh,
tuning into that, learning more about it, but like a while ago, like when I first realized like, oh, maybe this is like a chakra thing, like I was still learning about all of that. Right. And I remember going to, well, asking a friend if she knew anyone that like balanced chakras and all of that. And she was like, well, I have a friend that does Reiki. Like, have you ever tried that? And I was like, oh, no, let's try it. And at this point, I had just gone through an awful breakup. Like, I was in a depressive episode. I was just like awful. And I physically like felt it in my body, And I remember going to them and they were like, "Oh yeah, like it's kind of all gathered in your solar plexus and like what are you feeling, physically?" And I was like, I feel like my stomach is just always in knots. And it's not that my stomach is upset because I feel like that would be more kind of like sacral, but it was just like I don't like physically, like it was just in knots, like tense all the time. Like when you get that feeling in your stomach when you're nervous, like butterflies, but like in a bad way. Like it just felt
mm,
like that all the time. And one of the other things that he related that to, besides, personal identity and kind of taking your power, is guilt. And if you're feeling guilt, that tends to kind of glob up in there. And I talked to him about that. And, I realized that I'm a person that, because I am such a people pleaser by nature, I feel really guilty about things that I absolutely shouldn't, But like the best example I can think of is one time someone asked me if they could borrow my air mattress. And I was like, oh, I don't have an air mattress. Sorry. And my first thought was like to apologize for that.
um,
Like I don't even have one. That's not my fault. You know what I mean? And it's just like that guilt that comes just so naturally to me. And because, I try to just, oh, I shouldn't feel guilty about that. Oh, I just push it off. That bottles up in there, and
mm,
physically in your body that bottles up. And I think that makes sense that it relates to, being in your power, because you are
mm.
kind of not stepping into your power if you're just feeling guilty about everything and trying to be a people pleaser all the time. So I know for me, that's the one that is usually out of balance.
Mm.
The only other one I've really like had multiple issues with is throat chakra, which
Mm.
I think also makes sense because, it's we're in we're in a society these days where sometimes it's difficult to know when to speak up and when to not, and especially in
True.
this career, and
Yes.
especially as women, and I feel like we all struggle with that a lot just throughout life, and again, like that bottles up in your body feels these things and
Mm.
it gets trapped. um and as far as like figuring out how to release it, I do very much recommend Reiki. Like
I do
it,
Reiki, by the way. I'm a Reiki
yes,
practitioner.
yes, you guys, it's like it is amazing. When I first had it done, like I just I felt so like physically lighter. Like I almost felt like I was like mildly high leaving this experience, like it was amazing. And it's powerful. I mean, I had another friend, she wasn't quite certified yet. She was just learning still Reiki. And she was like, "Do you mind if I kind of like practice on you?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And this was also during this time, and I was going through a really dark time. And she got to like my stomach area and she was like, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I think I need to take a break." And she got physically ill
Whoa.
because of that energy exchange. So like it is extremely powerful. It's extremely physical, even though it, seems like it's more of just a psychological thing. It is really physical as well. But, I mean, that can be expensive. And I understand people that don't take stock in it too. It's, whatever you believe is fine. But I think going back to like with my morning routine, it's like I feel better when I move my body, stretch my body, take time to like get zen, do the breathing, all of that, organize my thoughts, whether that's pulling a tarot card or even like journaling. I'm not a huge journaler, but I know it works for a lot of people. I think just taking that time for yourself to really like, hey, what's going on in my mind? What's going on in my body? And like force yourself to kind of just relax.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to mention when you said that that person who was practicing Reiki on you, they were kind of new and that they felt physically sick or something.
Mhm.
So I wanted to speak to that for a second. So this energy stuff, yeah, some people don't believe in it, but hopefully people listening to my podcast will at least be open to it because I used to not believe in this stuff and then it's changed my life. So I am a big advocate for it. So I will be speaking about it as if it's real. And so to me, it is. And one thing that they teach us as practitioners is how to have energy boundaries. And so it makes sense that person was new because she felt the energy, which was real, and it affected her because it's real. And she was new. So she didn't, not to throw her under the bus, but she didn't know maybe how to set an energy boundary or even that she needs to. And
Mhm.
so I have a practice for before and after I do Reiki on somebody to make sure that that's their energy and that I don't take that with me for the rest of the day, things like that. So I just wanted to mention that. And also, I noticed that there's been two different times so far in this podcast that you mentioned something that gave you kind of like a natural high. So I thought that was really interesting. So one was the Wim Hof breathing, I believe, and the other one was the Reiki, like the energy work.
Mhm.
So do you have anything to say about that or to add to that? Because I just found that like an interesting connection.
I mean, that's what works for me. And not everybody's going to get that same experience out of those experiences. But I think if you can find something that does that for you, I mean, whether it is like a physical high, like from the breathing, like that is like it's scientifically going to happen if you do it right, right? Or if it is just a kind of a mental, rush or whatever, like find what it is that does that for you. And that can kind of be your, what's the word? So, like your flow, and whether that is something like meditation, some sort of relaxation technique, or maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's painting, maybe it's playing music, like everybody reacts viscerally and mentally to differently to different things. But I think finding that for yourself is really great because, when you are feeling depressed or anxious or overwhelmed or exhausted, like these are things that can pick you up. And it's things that you can just do for yourself. You don't have to go out and find people to do it with or anything like that. You can pack it into, a spare 15 minutes in your day.
Yeah, you really just inspired me because I think a lot about flow
Mm,
and a lot of the work that I do has to do with flow. And so, what I'm gathering from what you're saying, which is a way that I haven't really thought about life before, but it sounds like finding something that puts you in a flow state and making sure that it's something that you can consciously choose to activate. Like it's not just a coincidence or like a happy surprise, like, oh, cool, that made me get in my flow, but something that you can do consciously that it's repeatable.
mhm.
And what's that word for that? Repeatable. There's another word that's
I know, I understand what you're saying. I just don't know what the good word would be.
I'll just go with
But
repeatable.
yeah.
We're making up our own words today anyway, so it's fine. So, I mean, repeatable is a real word. I'm just saying there's probably a better word for it. Okay, where was I? Repeatable. Oh yeah. So if somebody has a way to get into flow on purpose, and they can do that whenever they want. Oh, on command. I feel like that's the
Mm.
word I'm looking for. They
Yeah.
can get
Yeah, that's a good
in,
way to put it.
yeah, get in their flow state on command. That can be a cure for so many things in life that people complain about. And I don't mean it in a bad way, like, oh, they're complaining, they shouldn't be complaining. I don't mean it like that. People have really genuine complaints. Like, there's a lot of things in life that are very heavy and difficult. And I
Mhm.
believe that when we're in flow, that it makes us feel lighter and it helps get us through those things. So I'm just excited because it's like you said that and then it clicked in me and I'm like, okay, this is like we're on to something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important in life to find those, like find your flow, find what makes you happy, find what relaxes you. Like I know for myself, I like, sure, I had hobbies. I knew what made me happy, but I didn't really like know those specific things because I didn't know myself well enough, like in my 20s, and now coming into my 30s, like I've grown so much and I've put the work in to really get to know myself and yeah, to know those things that make you happy, that relax you. And then also on the other side too, that, upset you and trigger you and scare you and all of that, like knowing yourself, you can really help regulate your feelings in your body. And of course, you can't control it all. Like there's so many things that we can't control, but that definitely helps you. Yeah, just regulate, I think is the best word, your body and your thoughts.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So my next question is, do you have any shows, movies, or books you recommend?
Let's see. So, as far as books go, I've read a good bit of like self-help books, and some ones that I really enjoyed. You Are Badass by Jen Sincero. It was like I had read a couple of books that I liked what they were like trying to say, but I didn't really enjoy reading the book. And I was like, I think I'm just like over these self-help books or whatever. And
Yeah.
somebody had gifted me that book and I was like, okay, one more, we're just gonna get it done, whatever. And I actually really enjoyed reading it. And I feel like she makes it fun, she actually makes doing the work fun. And she also has a book about money as well, which I recommend. I also have been enjoying Dolores Cannon. She talks a lot about like past lives and because her and her husband were hypnotherapists and they would walk people through their past lives and how that can affect you. I mean, now I do personally believe in reincarnation, not everybody does, but even if you don't, just, like generational trauma is a thing, ancestral trauma is a thing, whether you believe that you personally as a soul have gone through these lives or not, like this trauma just exists in our society. So I think that it can really be applied to no matter what your beliefs are. As far as, let's see, like shows and things like that, this isn't necessarily a show, but there are a couple of people I would recommend following on social media, and they all have newsletters as well. Bonnie Gillespie, she is a casting director and she's also an astrologer. And she has a community called Self Management for the Actor, which I was really heavy into when I first came out to LA. It really helped kickstart like the business side of things for me and really wrap my head around all of that. And now she's been leaning more into astrology and horoscopes and that whole world. Her mom, I think, was an actual professional in that. And so she's really been leaning into that as well and starting a community centered around that. So she kind of combines these things now. So, if you're into the woo-woo and you're an actor, it's a perfect combination of the two. But she's also just a really big proponent of you are enough, I am enough. And really realizing that, we're in a career that you don't ever know what's going to happen. And you can put all the work in the world, but you can't control the outcome, so knowing that you personally are enough is huge, and really feeling that is huge. Another one I love to follow is the holistic psychologist. I follow her on Instagram. She has a community as well and a newsletter, and she is really good at kind of breaking down like, these are typical responses or conditions or things that, if you're in therapy, your therapist might bring up and you're like, what does this mean? Or where does it, come from? And really breaking that down and showing like, hey, maybe I have this abandonment issue because of, the way that I was raised, or maybe it has nothing to do with my childhood, but it's actually because of a past partner I had or whatever. And just really like giving real world examples that allow everyone to relate and to really kind of set off that light bulb moment of like, oh, that's why I think this way, or oh, that's why I act this way, and how to deal with that. And I like her a lot because she is, she's spiritual, but it's also based in science, in psychology, so you kind of get the best of both worlds with her.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
What is your message for the world?
I would say to really own who you are as a person. And sometimes that's way easier said than done, because we all want to fit in. We all want to be liked. And again, especially in a career like acting, where it's like you have to fit a certain mold, or whether that's how you've branded yourself or what the industry wants, or whatever it is. But you're always going to be wanted for who you are, whether that's being cast in something, whether that's getting a job, whether that's finding a partner, whether that's just people liking you. Like, they're going to like you for who you actually are, because sooner or later, if you're putting up a facade, people are going to see through it and it's going to crumble. And I think the biggest thing that people struggle with all the time, and I mean, I encounter it all the time personally, and I see other people struggling with it, is imposter syndrome.
Mm.
And it took me a long time to really get through that. And like I said, I still struggle with it sometimes too. But you have to realize that, like, if you're doing the thing, you're doing it. People are afraid to call themselves working actors. And it's like, okay, maybe you still have a day job. Maybe you haven't made any money from acting. But if you're working towards that, even if you're just auditioning or, making your reels or whatever it is, like whether you're even on set or not, you're still working towards it. You're still a working actor. And that goes for whatever career or hobby or whatever it is, like, if you're doing something, you are doing it. You're allowed to claim that title. You should not have imposter syndrome. And there's always going to be somebody that's not to your level. Even if you feel like you're on the most beginner level, there's still somebody below you that can look up to you and that can learn something from you.
That's
So don't
huge.
ever feel like you don't have something to give.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. So one thing I've been learning more about lately, because I've been learning about business and marketing and stuff. So besides having a message, apparently a really good business tip or whatever is to like have a call to action. So
Mm,
I like to add this on to the question where if you have a message for the world and let's say they hear you and they're like, okay, I'm on board. Like I get it. But now it's like, okay, well, what do I do? So I think that even regardless of business, even just human psychology is we need to be told what to do because our inner child is lost and seeking, and maybe there's certain areas where we've grown up and become an adult, but there's other areas that we're still learning and growing, and so we are still more in tune with that inner child, and so we need an adult to give us instructions and tell us
yeah.
what to do. So I notice all these things are related. We talked about the solar plexus and the throat chakra. So the throat chakra is self-expression, and where does that come from? It's from the solar plexus. It's like that's where the diaphragm is. So here I'll show people who are watching on YouTube. So solar plexus is here, the diaphragm. So that's where we get the personal power. So for speaking, even if we're not a singer and we're speaking, then we get from the diaphragm, the air, the breath goes up through our throat and then out our mouth. And so a voice, a self-expression, it is all connected with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody is struggling with confidence, what would you recommend they do either as their first step, or even if you have a few steps, what do they do about it?
I would say there's two things. One is if they are thinking about starting some kind of venture, whether that is, making a movie, starting a business, starting a podcast, teaching a class, like whatever it is, jump in and do it. And it doesn't have to be a, make or break career choice. Like, let's say it is starting a business. Okay, well, you can put a lot of money into a business, it can fail all of a sudden, right? But like, take that first step, whether that is say it's something you're selling, like start posting some of it on Instagram, even if you're not actually selling it yet, to like show off what you're doing, just something that's a first actionable step. Take that first step, because as soon as you start, it's going to get easier and easier. Yes, it's going to be more and more work, but you're going to feel like it's easier. Like the work, it's not going to feel as scary as you go and progress through it. And the other thing I think is, if you find yourself in a position to be able to give advice to others, do that. And, for myself, it ended up being through my podcast. Because when we started that, we were kind of like, well, all we have to really talk about of what we've learned is like what we learned making our first short at that point, and like what we've learned from classes and whatever. Is that just kind of regurgitating things we learned from other people? But it's turned out to be like, we've been able to share more and more as we've learned more and more, of course, but we've found listeners that really feel like they've learned so much and been inspired and like are really grateful to us. And it really opened our eyes to, okay, yeah, we may not be like top of the line professionals here, but we really do have something that's worth sharing with other people, and they're appreciative of it. So I know that opportunity isn't always available to everyone, but if you have somebody that wants to pick your brain over coffee, don't feel like you don't have anything to share with them. Like, take that opportunity to help somebody else out and to advise somebody. Or if they're like, hey, will you be my mentor? I know that could be a scary thing. Like, whoa, wait, I don't have any right to do that. But like, you have to just, if somebody's asking you for that help, that means you really do have something that they can gain from you. And I really think stepping into that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's like paying it forward, like
Mhm.
being the change you want to see in the world. I feel like it's
Yeah.
along those lines. I love that so much. And so I wanted to mention, when you were talking about once you get started and just take that first step, it gets easier. So my wording for that is that there's like inertia and momentum. And I think that's why it
Yes.
gets easier. So I totally agree with that. And then I also was going to give the example about with this podcast, how it's like I can't be a perfectionist. I have to just get it started, because I've been talking about doing a podcast for years. And here I just posted my first one. I don't have an intro or an outro yet, or a song or anything like that. And I don't even have the audio set up to put it on, Spotify and all those things. But I posted my first one, and here we are on the second one in a week. Like, this is my second one in a week.
Yeah.
And it is going to get easier, because now I'm not as scared of doing the editing, where before I'm like, I don't even know what program I'm going to use. And now not only do I know what program, but I have the practice and the confidence, and the confidence will only grow. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Also, because I'm new at making podcasts, I don't know if I'm supposed to interview the whole time and not share anything about myself, or if it's okay if it's like a conversation, I'm sharing my own things.
I think it's good. I think it's good to share your own things too, because then your audience gets to know you as well. And it gives like us more to talk about. So I'm a
That's
fan of
true. That's true.
that.
I think one reason I'm conscious of it is I just watched the premiere of Don't Suck. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
It's a comedy with Matt Rife
Okay.
and Jamie Kennedy. And it was so funny. Like, I went to the premiere, the screening with the Q&A, like cast and crew. It was so cool. Such a good experience. And one of the scenes that was really funny was there was like a morning talk show,
Mhm.
and so for the radio, they were like interviewing guests, and they didn't let them talk. Like, they would ask them a question and then answer it themselves. And the guest
Yeah.
is just like, like they have nothing to say. Like, you already said everything. So I think I'm just hyper aware of that right now. Such a funny movie. Everybody should go see that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it came out in theaters today. I think that's why the premiere was
Nice.
yesterday. Okay.
You know what? That
And
actually reminds me too of like, um, whenever people are like afraid to, offend somebody or whatever. Like I've heard multiple people say this in giving advice to people, is like, if you're aware of it, you're not going to do it. Like the fact that you are aware of like, oh, I don't want to, not ask or like answer the guest questions and not let them talk and whatever, like you're not going to do that. You're aware of it, you're not going to fall into that.
that reminds me of, if somebody is questioning whether or not they're a good person, they're probably a good person. Yeah.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Okay, that's funny. Okay, and then one of the last things I wanted to talk about was we both have a Scorpio moon.
Yes.
So I figured, sorry, I didn't email you about that one because I thought of it as we were talking. I was like, oh, yeah, this is something that I've been wanting to talk about. So I was curious if you can share a little bit about your experience having a Scorpio moon. Also, we should probably share with the guests what that means. I feel like with us, we're like, oh, we know what that means, but other people might not. Do you want to share your experience and also your interpretation?
Yeah. So for me, well, I'll kind of give, I guess, the outline of my chart so you can kind of relate all of it. So I am a Virgo sun, Scorpio moon, Gemini rising. And I'm like also on the cusp of all of those too, because there's been times like when I've had people read my chart and they're like, oh, well, you're kind of like especially my rising, like you're really on the cusp, and you have these tendencies too. And it's like, well, of course, everybody has a little bit of tendencies of whatever, right? But I've always really related, especially to the Virgo-ness and the Scorpio-ness. And for me, it's as a Virgo, I'm so like I'm a people pleaser. I'm a solution finder. I'm a solve all the problems and everybody else's problems and never my own kind of person. And then from the Scorpio side, it's like all of my frustrations that build up from that Virgo-ness, I feel like are kind of released through the Scorpio side. And it's, those are my fuck it all moments. Those are my like, I don't care, life is too short kind of moments. So I feel like that's kind of, they work almost butting heads, but it helps balance me out. So, yeah.
That is great context too. That like for someone who doesn't understand it, I feel like now they would understand it because yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My interpretation of Scorpio moon, well, first of all, Scorpio is known as intense, emotional, kind of like vindictive. Not evil, but like there might be a dark side.
Mhm.
And the scorpion has that stinger. So a Scorpio might, I don't want to say seek revenge. I'd say maybe in our mind. In our mind, we see the revenge, but
I always want to see it happen, but I'll never make it
I
happen.
I wonder if it's because we're Scorpio moons. So moon is like, yeah, it's more of on the inside. It's more of like how we know ourselves, and it's our shadow side. It's our inner self. So
Mhm.
sometimes if somebody shares their moon, other people might be surprised because they don't
Mhm.
see that side of them. So that being said, possibly we are similar in that we won't actually carry through
Yeah.
our revenge fantasies. um but anyway, yeah, so the Scorpio moon, the first time I ever heard about it was like, I don't know, 7 years ago. And somebody was really into astrology and asked what my moon was, and she found out it was Scorpio, and I didn't know what it meant. And she was just like, oh, I'm sorry. I was like, why? She's like, Google it. So I went home and Googled it, and my life has never been the same since.
Yeah.
It was saying something along the lines like there's this inner conflict that will never be solved.
Yep, that sounds right.
Like there's some kind of like dichotomy, and it's not aligned, and it's just always going to be a struggle, and there's always going to be some sense of darkness and unhappiness.
Yeah.
So as I wear my pink lipstick and my bright smile, now y'all know some of what's going on the
The
inside.
darkness inside.
I'm just
I
kidding.
actually, I would love to read this. I got,
Okay.
so there's someone on Instagram, they're called the Pittsburgh Astrologer, and being from Pittsburgh, like she just, I mean, that's what she does. She's an astrologist, but then she posts a lot of really funny and relatable memes and stuff. And every now and then she'll do like a roast me AMA. So I sent in my big three and asked her to roast me. And her response was the judgment, the scathing critique. Virgo and Scorpio are my favorite gossip hounds, and fold in that Gemini dilettanteism, bringing in varied tidbits from many walks of life, and you've got quite the cackling coven. A dark high priestess with ADHD, which is funny because, like I said, I'm getting into like occult sciences too, but obsessed, honestly, is how she ended it. So I was like, oh, yeah, that all tracks.
That's so funny. What's so interesting is if I didn't know you and I just heard about your signs, I might be a little scared.
Oh, yeah.
But I could tell everybody listening, I've known Tessa for like 8 years and I've never seen any of those sides. So maybe it's your Virgo rise, I mean your Gemini rising that is like really showing, because Gemini is social and
Mhm.
like, how do I word it? Adventurous, fun to be around, social, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I've only known you as good vibes, and to me, knowing that you have those other sides of you just makes you more interesting. And what I like to tell people if they get scared about my Scorpio moon, if they find out about that, is I'm very aware of it. And if there's any kind of like inner impulses or things that are natural, I'm so aware of it that I make sure to keep it in check, and I don't
Mhm.
suppress it. Like I embrace it as far as who I am. Like I definitely identify with like Persephone. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you describe Persephone to people who don't know her?
Um, it's hard for me. I don't want to go into the whole story of it, but well, I'll let you describe it since you brought her up. I feel like that's just the easier way to go. Because I feel like I
Okay.
could dive deep, but I don't want to do a whole tangent on
Okay.
it.
So it's Greek mythology, right?
Mhm.
And so Hades is like the king of the underworld, and Persephone is essentially the queen of the underworld, but she went down there not really by her own choice. Hades kind of
Mhm.
stole her, kidnapped her, and turned her into this dark queen. And as this badass woman that she is, she essentially like rose from the ashes. So she's kind of um parallel to like a phoenix rising from the ashes. And so
Yeah.
she came up to the regular world and took all of her wisdom and knowledge from the underworld. She took that with her to inform her decisions, but to do it in a way that is, I guess, responsible.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to put it. Cause I was like, I don't want to go on a whole tangent. That was a nice succinct way to put it. But yeah, like totally just like, yeah, stepping into your own power. Like I love, like you said, like a phoenix rising from the ashes and like doing it in a way with grace. Because there's
Mm,
so many stories about um like underworlds goddesses and stuff like that. Like you look at like Lilith, for example, and she's known as being like this, corruptive, like dangerous force, but like people still really, like to pray to her and worship her because she is such a like feminist, like I am in power, but she's also like eating babies and shit. You know what I mean? So
whoa.
it's like, yeah, and there's
I don't really resonate with her. I don't know.
but again, there's like that's another one I could go into a whole tangent about because there's so much about her that's misunderstood as well. But I think,
Okay.
yeah, Persephone is such a great like you can come back from it. You can be powerful. You can be, a badass, but to do it with grace.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
guess that's my point, is that I'm conscious of the darkness and I make sure to not put it onto other people. Like if I hurt people, like I promise it is not on purpose. Like I've hurt
Mhm.
people and I promise it is not on purpose. Like I will
Yeah.
never go out of my way to consciously hurt somebody. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah.
So I know that you touched on this a little bit earlier, but for anybody who listened all the way through, first of all, thank you. And also just to remind people how they can find you and anything that you want to say about how they can donate to
Mhm.
helping sync with post-production.
Sure. So there's a lot of ways to find me. I have a personal website, tessamarkle.com, as well as my personal social media at Miss Tessa Lauren. And then for my production company, femregard.com. Again, you can sign up for the newsletter right from the website. You can also listen to our podcast right from the website. Our social media is at femregard. And then for our movie Sync, social media is at Sync the Movie. And our Indiegogo campaign is available both on our website, femregard.com, and on the Sync social media, like just right there, link in bio. Like I said, you can find us right on the Indiegogo website. Just type in Sync the Movie, SYNC, and we'll be running that until the 5th or 6th of January. I forget the exact date, but so still have a little time to donate. And just to sum it up, we are taking donations to finish funding our post-production and marketing for our feature. So we need about, I think we're close to, well, I think we just reached 4,000 right now. So we're looking for about 6,000 more, and that can allow us to just kind of wrap everything up with the movie and finally get it out there for you guys to watch.
Sounds good. And you guys need to watch this movie. Like, I haven't even seen it yet, but I was telling Tessa when she first told me about the plot. I'm trying to think when that was. It was maybe a year and a half ago or something.
I mean, we've been working on this for like
Yeah.
2 years in planning mode. So,
So as soon as I heard the plot, I was like, yes, yes, like this needs to be made. I need to watch it right now. And so I've been following along every step of the way. So when I found out this was actually going to happen, and Tessa's starring in it, and I'm like, I need to watch this. So please donate so I can watch this sooner, and you should watch it too. And
thank
follow,
you.
yeah, and follow along so that you can know when you can actually watch it. Because I'm sure
Yes.
you'll be posting, and I will be posting too. Once it's like available, I'm going to be spreading the word so everybody can watch it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any last thoughts?
No, just thank you for allowing me to come on this. I mean, I'm such a kind of woo-woo person that I sprinkle it in a lot, like even in just my interviews with people on my podcast and stuff. I bring it a lot in my day-to-day life, but it's nice to actually get to like talk to someone about it, and to, for listeners that are interested in that sort of thing, and to talk about how it is like integrated into your career, into your day-to-day life. Like, it doesn't just have to be something that you go on a silent retreat and do, or like trip on mushrooms and tap into, or whatever, like it can be just a daily practice and part of your routine.
I love that so much. Everything you say, I'm like, yes, yes, I totally agree. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Tessa, for being my guest, and I'm excited to see what happens with this film.
Yay, thank you.
You're welcome.